In this video, I'm ranking the best and the worst legends in Apex for Season 14. We got a lot of legends, so let's get into it. D tier. I'm starting out this list with the only legend I'm putting in D tier this season, and that's going to be Lifeline. Lifeline continues to get the short end of the stick, proving to be virtually useless in comparison to other legends with similar reviving abilities, legends like Gibby, Newcastle, and even Mirage. While some minor adjustments were made to her kit recently in an attempt to make her more relevant, things like tweaking her care package and her heal drone, she still remains one of the least attractive picks, bringing little value to the table this season. It is tough when you bring in a new legend that has some similar capabilities to a previous legend. How do you balance that? Which one's going to be better? Which one's going to be worse? Right now, I think Apex is trying to figure that out. Moving on to C tier. Now, starting off in C tier is going to be Bangalore. With the prominence of the wall hack meta in these recent seasons and Seer's usage rising drastically, Bangalore's abilities ultimately end up hurting the team more often than helping it. Unless you have a scan legend on your squad, her smoke can hinder your ability to see enemy teams, and if you're attempting to use it to get away, enemies can just simply scan you right through the smoke. And as for her ultimate, sure, it can deal damage and stun the opposing teams, but it can do the same to you and even stun your teammates as well. Bangalore is one of the few legends whose both abilities can negatively affect her squad. As things stands with the existing legend meta, Bangalore simply isn't going to be one of the better picks this season. She is still a friendly pick for new players, however. Next up in C tier is Fuse. Now, Fuse is a lot of fun to play. However, his abilities don't exactly scream B tier or higher. His ultimate, the Motherload, is just far too easy to escape these days, whether it's Mobile Legends or simply just running out of it in time to take minimal damage. I'm talking about them taking 5 damage when they quickly run through Fuse's ultimate. It feels like it just doesn't provide enough usefulness except in very niche situations or if you just get lucky. Now, on top of this, his tactical ability can be incredibly annoying and useful for pushing people from behind cover, but all it takes is for a teammate to be in front of you, colliding with it, causing for it to rebound where you didn't intend, maybe even hurting you or denying area for yourself. I do understand that Apex can't just buff Fuse to the max, given how all of his abilities center around dealing damage. However, there needs to be a little more something to his kit, otherwise he's probably going to stay in C tier. Third in C tier, we have Revenant. Now, this legend used to excel on King's Canyon in previous seasons, but since then we've seen him fall from grace, and it's not someone I see getting used all that often. His ultimate, while powerful, continues to be very situational. They did add a small change to him this season, but it has no effect on gameplay. It's mostly just a quality of life change. It makes placing his ultimate down a little bit easier. The last legend I have in C tier is going to be Mirage. Mirage is first and foremost a pub legend. You're not going to see this guy in many high elo ranked games due to his kit just not offering too much utility for the team. His abilities are all about quantity over quality. His ultimate and tactical both have a rather short cooldown time, meaning you can spam decoys like crazy, but this only offers so much. The loud footstep audio from decoys make for a great distraction, but higher level players are nearly always going to know which is the real Mirage. Alright, moving on to the decent legends, B tier. Starting off is Crypto. Crypto is probably the most nuanced legend in the game. He's great for taking selective fights with a coordinated team, but he's not so great for solo queuing. It's just hard to justify running Crypto over some of the other recon legends who seem to provide info in faster and more effective ways. I still like Crypto, but he's definitely not for everyone. Next in B tier is going to be Loba. Now, they recently fixed the bug with her bracelet towards the end of last season, which does move her up a notch. But with a new legend like Vantage, it seems like Vantage would be a better pick than Loba. And I know their kits are fairly different, but for repositioning tactical, Vantage's seems way better. Loba's ult is helpful for her and her teammates at different times throughout the match, but it's just not always necessary, therefore leaving her sort of in the middle of the pack, B tier. Next up is Rampart, and she's another middle of the road pick. I find her to be very situational. I mean, her walls are really good if they're set up and in the right area, but it is a little bit more of a passive playstyle, and the walls don't always translate well to active engagements. Now, this season they did make a small change, making it easier to place her walls around her teammates, and if you don't know, now you know. Her ultimate is insanely overpowered. I mean, this thing can gun down a whole squad if you're set up in the right area. But in the end, I think it's just about those moments that you find yourself in where Rampart is applicable. Fourth is going to be Pathfinder. He's once again received 0 love this season. This legend is dying for a proper passive, but honestly, the bigger issue with this legend that very few talk about is not his passive, it's his hitbox. If his hitbox was taken down a notch, I'm sure we'd see his pick rate skyrocket. That aside, his mobility is still well above average, particularly his grapple, and it's certainly top tier in the right player's hands, making him fairly difficult to track, but because of his large hitbox, making him easy to kill. Next up in B tier is Watson. Now, for all of you Watson mains, you can finally thank me. I am placing Watson above D and C tier, and the main reason why is because they finally fixed the bugs centering around placing her fences. I think it took them around 3 seasons to properly fix this, and with that said, Watson is a solid defensive legend, but she's still fairly situational. She has excelled on King's Canyon in the past, but there are also many more options now than there were back then. However, just like with Rampart, she's not the most ideal legend for taking active fights in open spaces. You get Watson in a building or some high ground that is only accessible with some zip lines, like say Cage, then yeah, Watson is a great legend. The second to last legend I have in B tier is going to be Octane. His jump pad is far more useful on a smaller map like King's Canyon for quicker rotations, especially considering they removed the 5 jump towers throughout the map. The problem though is that most Octane players are still stimming down to 1 HP as they full send into a fight way ahead of their teammates, only to get absolutely rolled and expect you to come save them. And I know, there's some solid Octane players out there, but when the majority of players use a legend in unhealthy ways, it's impossible for me to overlook that factor when ranking them. I will say in the making of this video, I did play 1 game as Octane and I had a blast and I dropped 15 kills. The last legend I have in B tier is Ashe. Now, on previous tier lists, I had put Ashe in A tier pretty consistently, but with the change in meta, Ashe's usefulness has seemed to dissipate. She isn't necessarily bad, but her kit feels sort of underwhelming when compared to some of the other legends in her category. This is and will always be a common thread in Apex because frankly, some abilities are just going to be better than others, especially as you continue to add a legend every season. Okay, finally moving on to A tier. First off is going to be Gibraltar. Now, overall, Gibby has stayed exactly the same going into season 14, and he is still an insanely strong legend to contend with. However, it's the changes to other legends that I think have bumped him out of S tier, at least for now. Whether it's other legends' abilities getting buffed that can start to fill his role on a team, or for some like Mad Maggie being able to now counter his bubble, I think Gibby is starting to finally see a decrease in usefulness. I'm sure he'll still be played in the higher elo, but there is a better pick, so stay tuned. Second in A tier is Horizon. Her strong mobility and overall contribution she brings to the team in this area is what makes her such a high pick. Her tactical and passive makes her one of the best mobility legends in the game. Despite her ultimate getting nerfed this season, it's still an extremely powerful ultimate that has potential to wreak havoc on an entire squad. This thing breaks down doors, sucks opponents in to get hit by grenades. I mean, at times, it's just flat out ridiculous. Sure, if your whole team instantly starts spraying it when she throws it, you can take the ultimate out fairly quickly, but that isn't always possible. Third in A tier is going to be Mad Maggie. With the improvement of her Wrecking Ball and the doubled projectile speed of her Riot Drill, coupled with her passive that pairs extremely well with shotguns, this legend makes for an extremely satisfying run and gun type of playstyle. Some may say she's more of a B tier legend, and that's fine, but if you have an aggressive playstyle, Maggie can be a top pick this split. She's also going to fare pretty well on King's Canyon given that her Wrecking Ball has a lot more distance to it. It's going to help navigate her team a bit quicker throughout some choke points, and there's going to be a lot of fighting on this map, as you guys probably already know. Next up in A tier is going to be Wraith. Now, Wraith wasn't changed in this update, but she still is a really strong legend. The versatility that Wraith's kit offers is extensive. Wraith has a true skill gap when you master her phase and her portal. If somebody wanted her to be an S tier, I wouldn't argue, but I think that it will come down to what game mode you're playing in and if you're playing in solo queue or with a pre-made team. Her passive is what's extremely weak though, especially when you compare it to some of these newer legends. Last but not least in A tier is Vantage. Vantage has proven to be a solid legend so far. I mean, it's still early on in the season. However, Apex had another great legend release because this one doesn't appear to be too overpowered and nor too weak. Her tactical is an amazing repositioning tool. Her passive provides a lot of information for her and her team, and her ultimate is very unique. This is the only ultimate in the game that can be used before it's technically at 100%. Vantage gets a bullet every 30 seconds for her ultimate, and for every shot that she connects on, the damage is then amplified for her and her teammates. This legend feels like she has a lot of different aspects to it when you compare her to some of the earlier legends in Apex. But with that said, I have to say Apex did a great job keeping her relevant and well balanced. Alright, we're finally here, the S tier legends, best of the best. First is Bloodhound. Bloodhound's kit and role as a tracker is still incredibly powerful when it comes down to the wall hack meta. Some players may enjoy playing Seer more than Bloodhound right now. That doesn't take away from Bloodhound's value. They're able to provide reconnaissance on their surroundings quickly, and it's easily identifiable for their teammates, often requiring little to no voice communication, which makes Bloodhound a very strong pick for solo queue players, whether that's in pubs or ranked. Next in S tier is going to be Newcastle. Now, Newcastle received a massive buff to all of his abilities this season, strongly securing his spot in S tier. Every aspect of his kit was improved, starting with his passive, being able to move down teammates faster while reviving them, as well as being able to turn them faster for protection from incoming fire. This has to make him the strongest reviving legend in the game right now. His tactical mobile shield has 150 more HP than it did last season, and it's twice as fast to move as before, making it far more useful for making calculated pushes on enemy teams or just creating cover on the fly. Even the electrical effect on his ultimate received a slight buff, causing more stun and slowing effects to those who touch it. Newcastle is just a straight up walking fortress right now, so you can expect to see a lot of him in Season 14. Third in S tier is going to be Valkyrie. Now, hallelujah, Valkyrie did finally receive some nerfs this season, which if you know anything about me, you know I'm happy for this move. But I gotta say, it was still not enough to bump her down out of S tier. Her passive mobility remains extremely valuable in fights, making her very difficult to take down. Even with a 25% nerf to her ultimate, it's still one of the most powerful rotational tools in the game, meaning she will still be heavily relied upon in ranked and pubs. I'm extremely happy to see this legend finally get taken down a notch, but I still just can't confidently say that she's not one of the strongest and most useful legends in this game. And I'm also not advocating that she gets nerfed any further. I think right now she's in a fine spot, and let's just see how this season plays out with her. Alright, second to last in S tier is Caustic. Now, Caustic is the ultimate offensive and defensive legend. There's limited counters to his gas, and with proper barrel and ultimate placement, this makes an actual push on a Caustic insanely difficult. He remains extremely strong in late game, and his ultimate can swing an entire fight in his favor. He's always been very strong on King's Canyon, but just make sure you don't get caught out in the open with him, as he's easily able to get taken down out there. Finally, we reach the top of S tier, Seer. Now, shockingly, Seer remained untouched going into Season 14. He also remains an incredibly strong legend, and he's going to be highly utilized in high pro play, every elo of ranked and beyond. Wall hack abilities will always be strong and useful in first-person shooter games. But to put it plainly, the amount of information that a Seer can provide just unmatched. Being able to know where your enemies are will give you a constant advantage, and not only that, being able to stop them from healing, reviving, or even using their abilities is just, I don't really even have words. Not using Seer in Season 14 is kind of just straight up throwing. If you guys enjoyed this video and you're interested in 10 tips for all controller players, I suggest you check out this video next. Thanks for watching. Peace.